Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Your Spiritual Journey. This is Dr. Bob, and this is the space and the place where we talk about things important to your soul. As always, we ask that you like us, leave comments, subscribe, and maybe even support us on Patreon. All of that helps keep us on the air. So today's guest is someone pretty special. Her name is Dr. Nicole Dolan, and she's a depth psychologist. And that's something I've never heard of before, so I'm going to ask her about that.
Mhm.
She's an author and the founder of Sacred Path Holistic Therapy. With decades of clinical experience, Nicole integrates modern psychology with spiritual wisdom, somatic practices, and the lived reality of motherhood. She is the author of The Art of Chaos, a memoir on motherhood, trauma, and spiritual awakening, a raw and luminous account of her journey through generational trauma, sacred partnership, and raising neurodivergent children. Her writing invites readers into the places where chaos becomes crucible, where nervous system overwhelm, ancestral memory, and spiritual awakening weave together into healing. Beyond her practice and her book, Nicole is the creator of Sacred Systems and the Sacred Self coaching frameworks, guiding women and families through the threshold of self abandonment into wholeness. She also co hosts the podcast Sacred Conversations, where she explores motherhood, mysticism, and healing with authenticity and depth. Nicole's mission is simple and profound: to help others reclaim their power, presence, and peace by embracing the mess of life as part of the masterpiece. And with that, I'm going to turn the mic over to Dr. Nicole to hear her spiritual journey, and then we'll get into some of this very interesting work that she's doing. Nicole, the mic's all yours.
Yeah, absolutely. So, thank you first for having me here today and bringing me into your audience as well. And so, my spiritual journey. So, I've been listening to your podcast and I've heard some really incredible stories. And I think something that was really resonating is there's not just one, right? And so, really paying attention to what was coming up for me this morning intuitively, I actually was brought back to maybe my first one. I wouldn't say my first one, but my first profound opening. And what I can share about that is for me, it was in the mess. I actually just reflected on that now. Oh, I was in chaos then too. But it was in the mess, as it often is for us. You know, I lived my life for a good period of time, knowing that I was very intuitive, knowing that I was tapped into something deeper, but busy. And so I used to actually literally say to God, like, okay, I don't really know exactly who you are or what you are. I was raised Catholic, but that didn't resonate for me. And so I would literally say, but I promise when I have the time, I'll figure it out. And I would just keep putting it off and putting it off. And I was 29, or I was around 30, around the Saturn return. And things were just falling apart. It's funny because it's been so long since I was in that mess that I'm like, okay, what was happening? I was going through abandonment. I was going through betrayal. I was going through abandonment that was tugging at really significant old trauma, meaning I thought I was going to die. I was so enmeshed. I was so codependent that abandonment for me from a partner was so significant. I had lost a family member, a dear uncle of mine, and then I had found out that the person who I was with then was going on this, escapade for the weekend with his whoever. So everything in my life was just, falling apart. And I was on the road and I was driving, and it had been about 2 weeks since I was going through this. I'd lost 13 pounds in 14 days. I mean, it was just horrible. And I'm driving my car, and I'm in this very forward momentum, this like nervous system flight where like I can't stop. If I stop, I'll die, is how I felt. And so I couldn't stop my system, and I got stopped in traffic. And I didn't have it in me to be stopped in traffic. So I actually literally got out of my car and looked up into the sky. And of course, it's like raining and the whole bit, right? And I just start screaming. And I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss here, but I had said literally the words I said, "What do you want from me? What the fuck do you want from me?" You know? And then I heard a word, and the word was lakeside. And I didn't know what that meant. I was actually so belligerent at the time and so upset and hadn't eaten and hadn't slept, and I was so crazy that I actually didn't even take it as divine intervention. I just was like kind of pissed off at the sky. Like, okay, fine, whatever. I don't even know what that means. I'm just gonna get back in my car and go.
Would you
And
repeat that
so that
word,
night I was
please?
staying with a friend, and that friend I'd been staying with her consistently every night. I knew how to get to her house, but for whatever reason, I got lost on my way to her house. And I wound up in front of this ginormous church, and it said Lakeside. So I said, "Okay, fine." So I drive into this church. I'm literally going the wrong way. There's signs in front of me like wrong way, you're driving the wrong way, you know? And then whatever, you know, so and then I find a spot, and I back my little car in, my convertible that's like soaking wet, you know, all the rain sopping through. And I get out of the car and I turn around, and there's this little metal sign on the parking spot that I chose, and it says, "Welcome home, God." So, that was the beginning of me starting to listen more deeply, more intently, more like, okay, I surrender, I'm here. I do want to add before we go anywhere that it didn't bring me back to church consistently. It wasn't about religion, it just was a way to wake me up. And so I'm grateful for the journey that I had after that, but it really just opened me up spiritually.
Yeah. Yeah. So going back to your childhood, were you raised in any particular faith tradition?
I was raised my parents were Catholic. Um, I feel like, you know, we were kind of sometimes we went to church as devotees and then sometimes we didn't, but I was raised Catholic.
Okay. And I'm assuming well before you were 30, you left the house of your parents. So did you
Mhm,
practice
mhm.
any religion after you left home?
I did not. I did not. I had like I said, I knew I was connected to something deeper. I knew my intuition was there, but I wasn't a conscious person. I wasn't deeply aware of it. I have friends that will tell me like, "Nicole, you've always been like this," but I didn't see that. So, but no, I wasn't pursuing anything religious.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm assuming because I know that you're Dr. Nicole, that you uh, took some kind of an educational path once you left home. So what did that consist of?
Yeah, so I left home, just like most people do, around 19 years old, 18, 19. And I didn't do what a lot of people do. I had friends that went to college, and I kind of just went where they were and looked for loopholes in life. I wasn't ready to go to school yet. So it took me quite a while actually to turn towards a path of education. And then when I did, it was actually at the point, excuse me, I wasn't anywhere near having the degrees that I needed to get into therapy. But when I decided I wanted to pursue being a therapist, I actually had to start from the beginning and move rather quickly because I needed to get a master's. So I did that when I was ready. I went through, 8 years of school back to back pretty quickly once I decided I wanted to. And yeah, and I pursued, I had my bachelor's in psychology, I did my master's in counseling psychology, and then I wound up going back and doing a PhD in depth psychology.
And what is depth psychology? I've never heard that term
Yeah.
before.
Yeah, so are you familiar with Carl Jung?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's Jungian psychology.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's what it is. But it is, for me, I always describe it, I'm not a Jungian analyst, but for me, what it did is it taught me how to work very intuitively. We paid attention to the unconscious. We paid attention to the collective. We paid attention to dreams, anything that was calling to us as symptom, we trusted was symptom of soul. So where you might go see, a therapist or a doctor that is looking to alleviate depression, anxiety, right away, we would really hold it in this way and say, well, what does the soul want? Like what's happening on a deeper level? And so that work winds up being about transformation and healing, and often, and I never pushed this on anyone, but what I came to learn from it was spiritual awakening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's something about your journey with this book that kind of fascinated me, uh, because I did listen to your podcast with Robin, and from that I gleaned that Robin actually was your editor first.
Mhm.
So how did that come about? Because you worked about a decade on this book. So, can you take us through
Yeah.
that that part of the journey and how did that happen?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So Robin came into my life very organically. Like when you ask that question, I'm like, I actually don't even know if I know. So yeah, I wound up working with a book coach who introduced me to her. And I was probably 5 years into writing the book by then before I actually felt like, okay, it's time to reach out and have somebody support me on this journey. And so once I did, she came in very organically and she was just, I mean, she was an absolute perfect fit for me as editor. One of the most beautiful things I've shared with her is I would send her my work and she would send it back and she would change things so slightly or shift like the nuance of something in such a way that I didn't really know what was hers or what was mine as far as what had changed. And so it was a shared voice. And so we realized that we were very, very similar in how we live and examined life, and how we see the world through the lenses that we do. And yeah, that's how Robin came on board. It was meant to happen. It was a synchronicity. It was a,
Yeah.
soul relationship, I would say.
Well, I have to say that on the podcast, the two of you sound like one voice. It
Oh.
it is amazing.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, I appreciate that. And I appreciate you went and listened. That meant a lot. So,
Well,
yeah.
it meant a lot to me because, as you know, when you first suggested that we have 2 sessions, I never sign anybody up for 2 sessions in advance. I mean, sometimes it happens because we have so much to cover and just not enough time in one session. Uh, and, when I listened to the podcast, I thought, okay, we got plenty to cover and talk about. And your life just seems so interesting. Uh, so you're raising 2 neurodivergent children.
Mhm.
Uh, and that term neurodivergent can cover a whole plethora of possibilities. So are you okay with talking about that a bit?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So neurodivergence in itself is always so interesting to me because I'm like, well, first off, just so you know, what neurodivergence means is that we all have different brains, and we do all have different brains. And also, in order for someone to be neurodivergent, what it scientifically means is that there has to have been at some point some change in the brain. And so that can be, trauma, illness, anything that can happen that can change the brain, even things that are positive. So really, I stand at a place and say, okay, well, we're all neurodivergent then. So the language and the labels don't make a lot of sense to me, but what I would describe under, the labels of the world that we give is my oldest is what I know now or believe as autistic, and specifically what you would call a PDA profile, which means she has a pervasive drive for autonomy. And then I also have a younger one who I haven't diagnosed, but I'm pretty sure is ADHD. So that's, I can give you a funny example of what that looks like. I literally have one that, you know, thoroughly enjoys running into walls and bouncing off of them literally.
Mhm.
And then I have one that's like, "Oh my gosh, stop," and then I'm the one that's like, "Okay, this is too much. I'm overstimulated." So it can be, fun, and it can be funny, and it can be a mess, and sometimes it can just be way too much. But my journey with neurodivergence certainly involves mostly around Ella. And she's 9 now, and so I always speak about my initiation into motherhood. I always say, like, yeah, after about 7 years, I felt like I was a mom. It wasn't an easy journey for me at all. It was very unfamiliar. I think even if my kid wasn't on the spectrum, it would have been unfamiliar for me in ways. But I mean, it was very, very intense. I had a child who was crying all the time. I mean, from the time she was 2 weeks old until now. And if she was, not crying, she was sleeping, or she was fussy, she was irritable. She was just always having a really hard time. And I didn't know what that meant or why. I learned a lot about my own system at this time. And what I can share about my writing and the work in the world that came about from it is I learned a lot about the nervous system. Um, but I also went into learning about what's coming up in our bodies when our children are having these big meltdowns, or when they can't follow the norms, or and so it's a conscious parenting perspective, Dr. Shafali's work, and others. But I always held the question when I would read something about that, when somebody says your child is your mirror and they are teaching you, I always said, okay, well, tell me how, tell me why, what does that mean? And so I feel like my journey in writing my book and in mothering was very much figuring out what that meant, not on purpose, but just that was the
Yeah.
path. And so what it meant for me over time was my child was bringing up in me things that were being asked to heal. When she would go from engaging with me in play and being in a joyful place to, one thing can kind of tip her over to just, a 45-minute meltdown. The walls are basically like coming off, like it can be really intense. When we would shift in that transition, I often had this experience that I didn't understand then because it was just so stressful to me. I'd go into fight or flight, and it was like, okay, well, why is that happening? I mean, first you have to work with the nervous system to get your system to a place where you can start asking the questions, okay, what's happening? But once I started really tuning into what is happening for me in this experience as parent of neurodivergent children and this child, is I was really being asked to heal a lot. I was being asked to look at imprints in me where in my own life as a child, things went from safe to unsafe. I was looking at, times where I was allowed to feel things and I was met, or times where I wasn't. I was looking at really big splits in me when I would see the splits in my child. There were things that happened in my house that were like chaotic and loud at times. And so, like, that stuff would come up in my system for healing. And over time, the more healing that I did on myself, the more it started becoming about ancestry and lineage. It was like, oh,
Mm,
I'm not just carrying the weight of myself here. I am carrying the weight of a lot of women, a lot of stories. So it was the working title for the book right now is The Art of Chaos. And it was a crucible. Chaos was a crucible for this kind of healing and transformation. So that's what comes through right now. I could tell you so much more, but
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So it's would you say generational trauma that you're working on healing? And
Yeah.
are you uh, a believer in the fact that trauma that you heal now also heals the past trauma as well as future?
Yes, absolutely. I am. Yeah. And I feel like, I think a lot of us in my generation are conscious of and call themselves cycle breakers. And I think that they're conscious of the layer of, like, one generation past, like, what happened in their own, nucleus families. Um, but I don't know how many people are aware, or I wouldn't say not open, but like are aware that it goes even further back than that. And that,
Mhm.
yeah, I think that we are being called to do that work, because I do think it heals backwards and forwards. And then you can kind of get into like timelines and the theory of everything. And, is it
Yeah.
really backwards or not? I mean, I don't know. We're not going to go there, but certainly does it, from that perspective, does it heal backwards? Yeah, I do believe that. I think, and I have actually had experiences where I have done healing work with my grandmother who passed away when I was 2 years old.
Mhm.
So, and I, in that healing work, in that, very intuitive spiritual realm, um, felt and experienced her healing, like actually saw her move through something like you would as if she was sitting in a therapy room with me.
Yeah.
So I do believe that fully. Hmm.
Okay. Can we dig into that a little bit? Because
Sure.
because that's the realm where I like to live, and
Hmm.
it just fascinates me. Uh, okay, so this is someone who you knew up until you were age 2?
I never really knew her. I couldn't tell you how many times I had met her, if I had met her, and I feel like I have to apologize to my mother for that because I don't know if I met her or not. I
Yeah.
didn't know her in life. Yeah.
Okay, so how did you know that she was there with you, and what was it that convinced you that a healing took place, at the time that it did?
Yes, yes. Probably the most vulnerable question you could ask me there, Dr. Bob.
Well,
I'm okay with it, but I will share, I'm in the process of, in the memoir process. It's, my manuscript is complete now and it's on its way out into the world. Um and I'm having the conversations with family, right? And my family
okay.
is also asking, so how do you know this about your
Yeah,
grandmother? And so I share that it's, yeah, it is a vulnerable process. But basically, so I don't know if you've seen this show, but there's a show on Netflix called Another Self. Have you heard of this?
no, I haven't.
You
Another
might check
self.
it out.
Okay.
It's about family constellations. Have you heard of family constellations?
Yes.
Okay. So this show, I believe it was made in Turkey. I'm not sure, but they go through it's like meant to be, entertainment. I can't think of the language, but it's meant to be a show that you're, watching for entertainment, but they go through family constellations journeys. And I watched this show, and I had done some family constellations work before, in Sedona at one point, and afterwards I just felt inspired by it. I had seen felt energetically my grandmother before. I have a lot of friends that have special gifts, or that I should say we all do, but that are attuned to those gifts. So I had been in, mediumship and psychic places before where people have said, "Oh, your grandmother's here." And I can tune in. I don't claim to be a medium, but I can. There are things I can tune into, and I always noticed that her energy was really hard for me to attune to. I just couldn't for whatever reason. And then whenever I heard from other people how she would show up in spirit is very heavy. Like a very dark, not like dark evil, but just like literally physically like a dark energy that she was very shut down. And And so I went and I did this inspired by this show. I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna go back and do some more of this family constellations work." So I found this practitioner and I did this work with her. And she was the one who, in a family constellation session, you will just like a therapy session, you'll share whatever's like present for you, and then they are skilled at tracking, okay, so what is the part of the lineage here? And sometimes, they use real people, which I haven't actually gotten to do, but they do on that show. Which I think would just be fascinating because they'll use real people to act out in front of you, potentially something that your ancestors experienced, which I think is just fascinating. But you can do this work with also, stones or figures. And so, once again, energy is everything and everything is energy. So, however you want to do it. I did it with this woman and we used figures. And she was the one that said, "Okay, your grandmother is here." I think she had told me that she was here. Either way, it was a guided process. I had my eyes closed. I can see visually a lot better if my eyes are closed, third eye. And I knew and I was able to attune to, okay, she's here. And when I say that, I believe that, and I don't, push this on anyone. I know your audience is open. Um, when I say that I believe that she did healing that day with me, there were a couple of things. One that I didn't expect, which was the practitioner. Well, first off, I won't go into this woman's my grandmother's trauma directly, but she validated the trauma that I intuitively felt. Like, I was like, over time, especially through my writing and especially through this healing journey that I was sharing with you of motherhood, I started putting pieces together because I come from an Irish Catholic line of like deep quietness. I've always said secrecy and shame, but if I want to say it in a more gentle way, like they've just been very quiet. Nobody's really told me what happened, or why my grandmother at 16 years old was put on a boat and sent from Ireland to America. And that's how we got here. I was told why. I was told the story. She came to help her aunt. But when I started going back in my own, as psychologist now, I started really tracing like, things that I knew in my mother, and things that I saw in myself, and experiences that I had, which I do believe in multi-generational gifts and also multi-generational trauma patterns. So I started to see and feel and intuit myself like her story more deeply. So it was really special for me to be in this family constellations session with this woman who then validated. She's like, I think that this is what happened. And in that moment, I was like, thank you for saying that because you're the only person on earth that can say that to me. Like,
Okay.
and I'm sitting with, my grandmother in this moment. And the other reason that I would say that I really felt like there was healing that happened, is at one point, well, let me say it this way. So, as a therapist, I know the stages of healing and transformation, and I know what it looks like. And what happened with my grandmother was exactly that, but accelerated. Like it was as if we had 6 months or a year together in a therapy room, which makes sense, right? Because in other realms, we're not dense like we are here energetically. So she was able to shift things and I saw it. I saw her see that I knew her story. Then I saw her feel and experience that and feel seen. Then I saw her recognize as the constellations guided me through and said, "Okay, we need to let her know also that she's in this realm and you're in this one and that you're not the same." So I actually found ways that I was entwined or enmeshed with her and that I was actually living her and me in some ways, if you want to say it. And so there was a little bit of a separation that happened there, a little bit of a boundary that would happen, maybe in therapy between a mother and a daughter. And then I saw her go through the process of, feeling seen by me or by someone finally, right? But me as granddaughter, seeing her story, holding her story, witnessing her. And then her actually, when she experienced that, went into like deep, deep grief. I saw her actually hold herself, like, as a baby, I held her energetically, and then I saw her actually, like, be able to let that go and be, like, at peace and transcend. So, really wild experience. Certain people, I don't know if I would share that with, but I'm always one that trusts the process, and I trust
Yeah,
that that's what came into this space, so I'm sharing that very vulnerable story with you.
I appreciate that a lot. Uh, but this is just between you and me.
Yeah.
There's, and I guess I'm curious about the process because I recently went through a process with someone who was on this podcast just recently, Jenny McFadden, uh, and she works in a way that she does spiritual healing sessions with people. Uh, and I preceded that with someone else who had been on this podcast, Ann Andrews, who does Akashic record readings. So
Mhm.
I first got some information about a childhood trauma that was still affecting me, and I didn't know that it was. And then I was able to take that the next step to someone who did the healing process with me uh, through a spirit guide,
Mhm.
and I was able to clear that trauma out. So I'm just recently having gone through that process. That's why I was one of the reasons why I was very curious about the process that you went through. Uh, Similar but very different at the same time.
Mhm.
Uh, and part of that, I guess, because of the Akashic records, I consider when that intergenerational healing is done, that somehow that goes through the quantum field or the Akashic records in terms of making all that happen, because there is no time and space. So all of that can be happening at the same time. Once it's happening at one level, it's happening at another level. So,
Yeah.
anyway, that's my curiosity.
Yeah. And I
Okay.
appreciate you sharing. And I know, yeah, you shared a little bit about that journey, and
Yeah.
it's fascinating and it's beautiful. And it's beautiful that we heal, we don't heal linearly, right? So we do circle back and kind of spiral to different levels and layers of things throughout life. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I think it's a beautiful example too of how you could live your whole life, and then have like this thing from the past that still is impacting in some way that can heal and can change things for you.
Yeah. Uh, just before we get off the topic of neurodivergent
Mhm.
children, I was wondering if you are familiar with the telepathy tapes.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yeah, I've had about, I think, 22 people now ask me that, and so each time I'm like, "Okay, I remember the first time." I remember the first time I got to, like, 3, and I was like, "Oh, okay, you need to listen, Nicole, because you hear something 3 times," and I'm like, "Okay, this one's gonna keep coming."
Yeah.
So, yes, I'm excited. They're actually filming a movie about it now, which
Right.
is just so awesome.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Uh, yeah,
I
that
wish they
that
would work with our. Yeah, sorry. I was just gonna say I always find myself wishing they would work with our verbal kiddos too, or
yeah.
do something like that with our verbal ones because they have a lot to say
Right.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, that podcast just really changed my whole perspective uh, toward people on the spectrum, and now I just see them as very special. And not that
Yeah.
everybody isn't special, but I can look at them and say, "Wow, you have a lot to teach me." And
Yes.
that's it's easier, of course, from someone like me at a distance. When you're in there every day, you said, "Okay, I've learned what I
Yeah.
need to learn. We can stop the lesson now."
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yes. Yeah. I had a recent experience where I actually had a conversation with God, and I'm like, "Okay, listen, like I came here to do some hard things. I came here, to be in service of others. I didn't come here to suffer the whole time, and I definitely didn't come here to lose her.
Yeah.
So let's
Right.
let's let's figure this out." Because the thing that I will say too, if anyone's listening and they do have, neurodivergent children in their lives, is yes, they are incredibly special people. And I will also tell you, I had an experience recently where I came into community with mothers of these children, and the mothers are incredibly special people.
Yeah.
And also, they are at, how do I say it? I would say like they're kind of, okay, I don't wanna say this wrong, but they're kind of, like, new to our planet in the sense that, at least at the level that they're coming in at, um, that they're here at a time where it's really hard to raise them because they're here to break all of the norms and
Uh-huh.
all of the systems that we have in place that don't work for any of us really. Like, they're no longer like, well, we are working to no longer abandon self. They just never have abandoned self. Like, they are here just to, like, mess like, they are here to bring great change, but it is really, really hard to raise them, and that means from a level of, behavioral challenges, but also they're extraordinarily sensitive to all things. And
Mhm.
that doesn't mean just stimulation, it means also, like, then you have to learn or understand or have support around biomedical, right? Because they can't eat the food that we're eating, and they can't wear the clothes that we're wearing, and so there's just so much that goes into it. It is such an intense journey.
Yeah. Yeah, but I don't know, it's just so important, I think, because there's so much chaos in the world around us, And it really does need drastic change, and it needs to be turned on its
Yes.
head. And
Yeah.
however we're going to get that help, we need it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that we all wish that they, just wore capes around and everyone could just see that.
I agree.
But
Okay, let's put
yeah.
your cape on here and
Okay.
tell me about Sacred Path Therapy because
Sure. So,
I understand that that's a nonprofit, and I understand it's to
mhm.
make sure that anybody who needs it can afford it. So, how did this come about and why and where's it headed?
Yeah, so Sacred Path Holistic Therapy is available and accessible to those in our licensed states. So we're licensed in California and Nevada. But through coaching work that I do, people can certainly work with me directly and or when they do need services that extra wraparound care, support, or financial support, there are ways that we can help support them that way too. So I just want to kind of lay that structure out. But Sacred Path is a holistic therapy nonprofit, and it came about very much from my own mentorship. When I was learning to be a therapist and doing my clinical hours, I had an incredible mentor, and he also had a nonprofit called The Place Within, where his intention was just that, to make this accessible to people, and not in the way that you see at other nonprofits where, um, how do I want to say it? It's just, it was kind of like, we're not a private practice, but we're set up that way in the sense that, like, you're still going to have a beautiful space to come, where it's a private space if you're working in person, where each therapist has their own office, their own space. They see you once a week, where a lot of these systems, you can only see your therapist for like 6 weeks, or it's hard to get into them, or especially for people that are lower socioeconomic or like going through crisis, it's even harder for them, right, if they can't pay out of pocket. So it's set up for a sliding fee scale where people who can pay, we ask them to, so that those who can't, we can offer services to. And we're not grant based or anything. We're just funded specifically off of whatever our clients bring in. So it is a collective of over 30 therapists now who are in the stage of pre-licensure. I also have a couple licensed therapists, and they are getting, their 3,200 hours of clinical work, which is a few years. They're master's level therapists, and they are able to offer those services in exchange for getting their hours. And so I went through this experience with my mentor, where I was the student, I was the trainee, and he asked me, one time he asked me to promise that I would supervise one day, that I would teach. And at the time I said, sure, whatever. But I went on to do that. So in order to be a clinical supervisor, you have to be, at least in California, you have to be licensed for 2 years and then you can supervise. So as soon as I was able to, I got my, accreditation to supervise. And then, I had one person come to me and say, hey, will you supervise me? Sure, let's do this. Then I had three. Then I had 8 or 10. And at some point, I think around 2020, something like that, it was, we went telehealth, which also made us
Mhm.
widely accessible to others. And so we were able to grow in that way. And we just continued to grow, but very, very organically. And I always tell people I am mother of Sacred Path. I hold Sacred Path as its own energy, its own being. and I let its path unfold as it desires.
Yeah.
So it's been a very organic, really beautiful process. And I will say it's really exciting to me. I have so many people that come and apply to work at Sacred Path, and I, as therapists, and I'll read their, their bios and their resumes. And it's really exciting to me how many therapists out there want to work in a different way, want
Yeah.
to be able to show up in this mind, body, soul way and actually know what that means. So, yeah, that's Sacred Path.
So on the website, it says that in the future you'd like to get into hypnotherapy and meditation and yoga and body work. Uh, is there is is there a path in that direction that says, okay, we're going to start here and we're going to grow in each of these areas? Uh, or
Yeah.
is it organic? It's like whoever shows up, if they have that skill, we will then weave it into our offerings.
Yeah, so at one point, it was a very intentional path. Um, and we do have some of it. We do have a craniosacral therapist there. We have somebody that does equine therapy. We have internal family systems. We have EMDR. We have a wealth of experience and background. And as far as body work, we do have a somatic practitioner in our office. So what I can say is it is a collective dream right now. I know for sure on the West Coast, I don't know if this is how far it is yet, but on the West Coast, I can say for sure there is a collective dream field of people that are working really hard to bring care into integration, holistic care. So for us to say, yeah, we want to have all of these extra services for people, we are not the only ones. Everybody is trying to figure out how to make that work. And the reason that people haven't figured it out yet is mainly financially, because we don't want to create systems where only the wealthy can come and get their
Mhm.
energy work and their craniosacral and their body work and their,
Yeah.
So, so we are doing it in the ways that we can, but we are really still holding like, yeah, how does that happen? And allowing the universe to unfold and answer that. But I will say, I am somebody who would have been pursuing that more if I wasn't brought into the world of autism.
Yeah.
So once I was brought deeply into the world of autism, things kind of shifted for me. And I now actually am very interested in the future creating an integrated space where parents of neurodivergent children can get things like neuropsychology, neurofeedback, neurosensory integration, biomedical support, etc. So it's and craniosacral and body work and all that stuff, but that's become more where my passion is now,
Sure.
and that's just
Understandable.
because of where I was led. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're working to balance qu- quite a few uh, balls in the air here. So,
Yes, the
how about
art of chaos.
how how about your own self care and practice that keeps you in balance during all of this, or at least in balance part of the time? Uh, what are the things that you rely on for your own self care?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I require a lot of self-care. I thankfully am very, very passionate about what I do, so my work doesn't burn me out typically.
Hmm.
When I need to take a break, I pause. But otherwise, certainly writing for me is a creative outlet, and so that also feels like self-care, but it is part of my doing
Yeah.
in ways. But I do a lot of nervous system regulation work, and something that I really realize that I now teach coaching clients is nervous system regulation is not about always staying in your window of tolerance. It's about building your capacity to move in and out of tolerance and then to also be able to expand further from where you were before. It's about clearing the energetic, you know, field. I actually think of the nervous system now. I mean, everything's energy, but I'm really holding the nervous system now as psycho-spiritual field. So it's about really being in understanding and connection with my own body, nature, and of course, other self care practices with body, but also regarding nervous system regulation, I've learned to work with vagus nerve and body as sort of like you would training a muscle. So instead of like trying to teach people how to get out of fight or flight when it's already happened, just like with, a toddler or an autistic kid who's in a meltdown, they're already outside of the limbic system. Like there's no reasoning now, it doesn't matter. So you're kind of like, once you get there, you're okay, let's just try not to get there next time. So very much my self-care is about really working with and honoring my nervous system so that I can build capacity, but that so it can also be like kind of trained to be flexible. And that can be, swimming in the lake, it can be EFT tapping practices, it can be these beautiful sound healing, things like little speakers that I have. It can be sound bath work. There's a lot of things that you can do, and I do a lot of them. So I create a lot of space for self-care, and I still burn out and I still have really hard times. I can share that recently we're dealing with something potentially I don't have to get all into it, but we're dealing with something, just trust what comes through, called PANDAS, and it's psychiatric acute neurological disorder after strep. So we had strep in our home, and my daughter has gone through a major like regression, and also just like basically what happens in this, and a lot of doctors don't even believe in it, but basically what happens in this is, especially for autistic kids and highly sensitive kids, when they get strep, and or there's also PANS for other illnesses, um, it doesn't actually clear the system like it would someone else. And so it becomes an immune disorder. And the immune system actually starts attacking the inflamed brain.
Oh, wow.
So I've been watching my kid like regress and behaviorally dysregulation challenges just off the charts, like so intense that I'm like, so, and this is where I'm going with it when I come to my self-care practices. So of course self-care, but also really staying in connection with God, right? Or source or divine or whatever you want to call it. I had a come to moment the other day where I said, okay, listen, I came here to do some hard things, and I'm okay with that. I'm in agreement with that, as long as there's the beautiful things too. But I didn't come here to suffer, and I didn't come here to lose her. So I'm going to need you, universe, to show up right now. And I'll tell you how I practice that. I take one step each day with intention of doing, right? How can I show up for my kid today? And then with that intention, I let the universe meet me and do the rest. So I feel like sharing that's a newer self-care practice for me too, because part of self-care is not overdoing and letting go of self-abandonment and trusting and surrendering and allowing God to do the rest.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that whole concept of you are not alone, and if you can if you can hold on to that concept and just say, all right, as you did, I'm going to do my part, but I need you to do your part because,
Yeah.
we're a team. We're working on
Yeah.
this together, and it's the only way we'll get through it is together. Uh,
Mhm.
and and I think that's wonderful. I mean, it's just so healthy. And if we could all hold on to such a concept and just say, I'm going to do my part, and then let the rest go to the universe and see what happens. And
Yeah.
somehow it all does seem to work out, you know?
Somehow.
Yeah. Well,
I
speaking
agree.
of working
Somehow.
out,
Yeah.
we're out of time. Uh, so as you know from having watched a few of these podcasts, at this point in the podcast, I give you the opportunity to leave the audience with a few words of wisdom. Uh, Luckily, I get to have you back after your book comes out, and we'll pick up where we left off and explore some of these other things that I'd love to discuss with you. So at this point, though, the
Sure.
mic's yours to let the audience know what they can do to improve their lives.
Yeah. So I'm going to close my eyes just for a moment and just see what comes. Words of wisdom. Okay. I saw that before I closed my eyes. So the words that are coming through to me right now are trust and paying attention to self abandonment. So, certainly is trust the process, like we're talking about, right? And that doesn't mean that we let go completely and just kind of let everything come to meet us. I think there's a balance in that. And so, like what I shared today, what if you take one intentional step towards your goal or whatever it is that's the pain point in life? And then be intentional and be directive too. I love that too. Somebody pointed out to me once that like, wow, Nicole, you like really tell the universe like when and how to show up. I was like, oh, I just thought it was kind of one of those, things about me whenever I was like, mad, but but it always works, by the way. So be intentional. Give, your co-creator directions, right?
Mhm.
And then trust that you will be met. Trust that there is a process, there is an unfolding, there is meaning to the mess and what you're going through. And self abandonment is such an important thing for us to start looking at in ourselves, the ways that we move away from ourselves and our truths, the way that we shapeshift to fit into certain relationships or places, the ways that we try to make other people comfortable and ourselves smaller. So those are the I would say the divine guidance that's coming through today.
Okay. Well, audience,
Yeah.
as always, take what resonates with you and incorporate it into your life and put the rest on a shelf until you're ready to deal with it. And until next time, this has been your spiritual journey.